Steve Witkoff, President Trump's special envoy, announced this week the beginning of the second phase of Trump's 22-point peace plan. Israel has nevertheless violated the agreement with near-daily attacks, killing hundreds of people. Israel violated the ceasefire agreement at least 969 times from October 10th to the end of 2025 through the continuation of attacks by air, artillery, and direct shootings. The founding members of the Board of Peace do not include any Palestinian names, but only Trump's hand-picked individuals. These include former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, as well as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, and the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner. Also on the founding executive board are Mark Rowan, the head of a private equity firm, World Bank chief Ajay Banga, and a U.S. National Security Advisor, Robert Gabriel. Each member would have a portfolio critical to Gaza's stabilization and long-term success. Missing from all the announcements was any mention of the international force that was supposed to deploy to Gaza under the 20-point peace plan. There was also no mention of Israel withdrawing from the 50% of Gaza it's continued to occupy. In an interview with The Economist, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu remarked about Israel becoming self-sufficient.
It's something else. We want to be as independent as possible. We can't on too much versed in economics to say, let's have an autarkic economy. But I do say that we want to have as independent an ability to manufacture our own defense industry as we can. So now in my visit with President Trump, I said, we very deeply appreciate the military aid that America has given us over the years, but here too we've come of age. So I want to taper off the military aid within the next 10 years. It's not
you want to taper it off to zero within 10 years?
Yes.
That would be a very dramatic shift.
Well, it's in the works.
This is very revealing as Israel has been a forward base for the U.S. for decades in the Middle East. Israel currently receives roughly $3.8 billion a year from the United States under a military assistance agreement. But if intelligence, technology, military training, and economic assistance is included, then U.S. help would go into the hundreds of billions. What makes such an insight so revealing is Israel and the U.S. have never had the same view of the Middle East, and despite close relations between Tel Aviv and Washington, Israel is really an American proxy, and both nations differ on significant strategic matters. Israel views itself in an existential position in the region that requires it to expand and increase its borders to well into the region. The U.S., on the other hand, doesn't view Israel in this light and sees it as just one nation amongst many the region. Israel's elite are finding the U.S. place obstacles as they try to expand and weaken regional competitors. The U.S. sees Israel as just another nation in the Middle East, and whilst it supports its security and normalization, Israel's founders and its current political elites see Israel as a regional power who should control most of the region. Israel was created by the British Empire to serve its agenda. The U.S. inherited the foreign creation and ensured it continued serving its regional agenda. Being such an artificial creation means it will forever need external support to survive, despite Netanyahu's ambitions. Officials of the administration of United States President Donald Trump have said that Canada will regret its decision to allow imports of Chinese EVs. The Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's visit to China comes as relations with the U.S. fray, as Donald Trump continues to say the U.S. should take over Canada. On his first visit to China as Prime Minister, Carney agreed to exchange the 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles for a scaling quota system, while China will cut tariffs on Canadian canola seeds from 84% to 15%. To the ire of the U.S., the deal likely marks the start of a gradual, years-long warming of Canada-China ties, a marked shift from their severe deterioration since 2018. Carney is looking to deepen relations with China as a hedge against volatile U.S. tariffs. Canada's economy is still overwhelmingly dependent on U.S. trade, so there are strong constraints on the pace of Ottawa's diversification.